Pleasant evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 25th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe, and as per usual, I'm eternally grateful for you to join us this evening as we have our discussion. So whether you're at home, looking at GBN television, or moving around, driving one of the local bars, wherever you may be, GBN television, GBN radio, or any of our social media platforms, welcome to this evening's edition of Beyond the Headlines. And this evening we're discovering sustainable water management. I know water has been in the news quite a bit, sometimes because of its excess, other times because of the lack thereof, but we have been talking about water. So sustainable water management, that will be our theme this evening. I have three gentlemen who knows the topic well, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. I will start with you, Mrs. Smith.
Good night, and thank you for having me. Terrence Smith, Acting General Manager, National Water and Sewage Authority.
Okay, Thompson.
Good night. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Trevor Thompson, former Chief Land Use Officer, Ministry of Agriculture.
Ms. Blache.
Good evening, everyone. Kevin Blache, Chief Technical Officer, Ministry of Infrastructure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you realize the breadth of experience and expertise that we have with us this evening, because water management in general and sustainable water management is a very intricate profession and certainly vocation for some of these gentlemen, and it is multidisciplinary, and hence the cross-section of expertise. But Mr. Smith, let me start with you, and if you can just briefly describe what is meant by sustainable water management.
That is a fairly broad topic, and if you'll permit me, let me just start before I respond to you to share with our team here and you and your viewing public that today is the 34th birthday of NAWASA. Yeah, NAWASA was formed on this day in 1990, so we celebrate 34 years as an entity. Prior to that, for several years, the water entity in Grenada was called the Central Water Commission, and so happy birthday, NAWASA.
Happy birthday, NAWASA. Happy 34th. Yes. Recognizing that was the creation, November 25th, 1990, the creation of the statutory body, NAWASA, which preceded the department within the Ministry of Works, CWC.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So to respond to your question, in summary, and I'm sure Trevor could also expand on it, sustainable water management. Now, there are various components to it. I could speak in particular to drinking water. When we talk about water in the water sector, there is water in nature, water in the rivers, raw water, water used for recreation, for industry, water that is harnessed by a water utility like ours, treated, distributed, and sold through a meter as drinking water. Yeah, we can also refer to wastewater management, and we also refer very often to urban drainage. So there are several aspects and components when we refer to sustainable water management. But primarily, I will speak to drinking water. By sustainable water management, I understand the need for us in Grenada as a society, as a water sector, and in terms of NAWASA as the organization owned by the government and people of Grenada, charged with the responsibility for the stewardship of production of drinking water. And that entails taking the necessary governance measures, administrative measures, technical measures, strategic measures, etc., to ensure that the approximately just under 8 million gallons of water that we produce every day, that we can meet this demand and any growing demand that we may have in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and for the next generations to come.
Anything you want to add as the sustainable water management, the broadest strokes?
Yeah, I think to make it as simple as possible for the public to understand, it's couched within the Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 goals, where more than 3/4 of them, water plays a significant role in ensuring that these things can be achieved. So water for health, water for food, water for construction and infrastructure, water for agriculture, water for soils, for recreation. When you have all of those demands on that finite resource, it's not infinite, it's limited. What you do to ensure that it endures for present and future generation having access and use because of its social and economic value, that will determine whether it's sustainable or whether it's not. Because of our small island state, where we have historically seasonal rainfall patterns, and with the advent of climate change and the changes we are seeing and experiencing, it definitely calls for a rethink in the way how we manage that resource.
So you're saying that when we speak of sustainable water management, we're looking at the provision of adequate water supplies for our social needs, environmental needs, ecological needs for today, but using it in a manner that the generations to come will still have water to use. Okay, fair enough. Mr. Smith, if I can get back to you, please use, or at least give us an indication as to what the production capacity is of NAWASA. I know you mentioned 8 million gallons per day. What is our consumption like? Because we're talking about meeting the needs of the population. Any indication as to what our consumption is like?
Yeah. So in last year, NAWASA had an average daily production of 7.8 million gallons per day. So just under 8 million gallons per day. That is what the plants produce. But I must now introduce the topic of non-revenue water.
But just before you do, what is our consumption? Because the question is NAWASA producing sufficient water to meet the population's needs?
In the rainy season, yes, but not in the dry season.
Any indication as to what is our daily consumption? We know your production is 8 million. What's our daily consumption?
Right. So roughly 25%. All right, 26% to be exact, is non-revenue water for which the authority does not get revenue. So roughly about 75% of that in the rainy season. Our production drops significantly to less than 6 million gallons per day. We can use the MGD, 6 million gallons per day in the dry season. So that stands to reason now the non-revenue water may be slightly less in the dry season.
My question still is, how much do we consume? Do you have an indication as to how much do we consume per day?
In the rainy season, approximately 75% of 8 million gallons per day.
We consume?
So about 6, so 3/4. So
you're saying that our consumption probably might be more, because if you said 8 million produced, about 26% is lost.
Yeah, 1/4.
And then the rest is consumed. Maybe our demand is actually more than the 75%.
No, well, it is about 6 million gallons per day because we meet the demand in the rainy season.
Okay.
Our production drops to just about 6 million gallons per day in the dry season. We still have this around 25% non-revenue water.
So you're convinced that the 6 million or thereabouts gallons that get to consumers in the rainy season is all that consumers need?
It's adequate for now, for the current period.
Okay.
Now demand is changing, demand is growing. Every new hotel that comes online, every new industry that uses water. So it's continuously, slowly growing.
Okay. Speaking of growth, we saw in the last census information that was released that we had population redistribution, is what I call it, because we didn't have an increase in population, but we saw larger numbers in the parish of St. George and the parish of St. David. How has that impacted NAWASA's distribution systems?
Well, it's important that I make the point that most of our water distribution networks from the various water treatment plants, we have a high degree of interconnectivity. Right, so one plant could assist another. We bring water on the west coast from Concord that has an excess of supply in excess of the demand in that localized area, right down into St. George's. Yeah, and that serves part of St. George Parish, right, or the tongue of St. George and so forth, right? And we have water coming from the Annandale water treatment plant in northern St. George's that serves as far south as Point Celine. And we have the various plants in St. David's, the distribution networks for which, like Le Savocat and so forth, are interconnected. So it's not like a particular treatment plant serves only a discrete area. There's a fair degree of interconnectivity. Okay. Yeah. So it's not like we have, compartments that a plant serves a specific one.
So Grenada's water is for Grenadians, regardless of where you live, effectively, because of the interconnectivity.
Generally, and NAWASA, we are in existence. And obviously, Carriacou and Petit Martinique are very different because our water networks there are fed from desalination plants. Mm-hmm. So that's a different picture altogether, not surface runoff. Right. But for mainland Grenada, our job is to supply water to the entire country. It just happens that most of the water production is in the northern half of Grenada, and the bulk of the demand is in the southern part of Grenada. Obviously, okay. The parish of St. George, southern St. George, industries, hotels, etc.
Okay, and you believe that the commercial plants account for a significant proportion of the consumption, certainly with the growth that we saw in numbers, St. George and St. David?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I must ask you this, so let me just put it out and then we get into sustainable water management. I have a couple of questions that I know hurts the heads of Grenadians. Drought because of dry season, so there was no water. Water start falling, river overflowing, and then there's no water because there's too much rain. Yeah, so no rain, no water. Rain, yeah. Lot of rain, no water. Yeah. What's the real problem?
Okay, so it's easy to conceptualize no rain, drought, less rainfall into the rivers, less stormwater runoff into the rivers, and it's easy to conceptualize that. Yeah. When we use the term extreme rainfall events, such as we've experienced 4 such extreme rainfall events in the last 2 weeks or so. Yeah, and these, I should point out, have caused a more significant negative impact on NAWASA's, at least for mainland Grenada, on our water systems, more so than the damage sustained with Hurricane Beryl on the 1st of July. Let me just make that point up front. Mm-hmm. So extreme rainfall events for these 4 rainfall events dropped in excess of 16 inches of rain. In each instance, over a few hours. Intense rainfall events. What happens is when the rain falls on the watershed, right, the areas that provide the surface water for our dams and intakes and that is conveyed to our treatment plants to be treated and then distributed. So the water source then, when rain falls on the watershed, some of the rain is used by the trees to grow, evapotranspiration. Some is evaporated, obviously during the day when the sun is hot. The proportion of that rainfall infiltrates into the soil, infiltration, and adds to the groundwater. And a far too high a percentage runs off right, as stormwater, referred to as stormwater, rainfall runoff. And because of the intensity of the rainfall and because of the relatively poor state of our watersheds, which we as a country have not properly maintained for generations, you have soil erosion. The rainfall.
Let's get. I know we'll get it because we have to speak about this specifically. Yeah. But what, as a consumer, we would like to understand, while rain is falling, our tap is dry.
Right. Because when you have extreme rainfall events, you have soil erosion, you have landslides, you have falling trees, and the silt and mud and stones and gravel and trees, vegetation, bamboo stool, large, very, very large trees and so on, come into the river. You use the term the river come down. You have a swollen river, a high river stage, and these come down and block our dams and intakes. When the dams and intakes are blocked with fine silt and sand and mud and so, water cannot enter cannot leave the dam to be transported to the treatment plant, or it may be so turbid that we actually shut down the treatment plant. Right? So in extreme rainfall, now we have an issue with the Concord water treatment plant, where when we have extreme rainfall events, we have very, very high turbidity. The plant currently cannot sustain that high level of turbidity. It is going to be addressed under the J-Cruise project. We could speak further to that at the appropriate time. But in essence, with too much rainfall, you have soil erosion, siltation, and blockage of the dams so that water cannot leave the dam to be conveyed down to the treatment plant. So we have to shut down the entire system. We have to send, in almost all cases, we can't clean the dams. We cannot use mechanical means to clean the dams. So it has to be done manually.
Okay. So this is a case of too much of one thing is good for nothing.
Precisely.
Okay, all right. The challenges that you mentioned, let me just bring in Mr. Blache as CTO for the Ministry of Infrastructure. For sure. And before I get into sustainable water management with you, we have a number of problem areas. So I'm going to call them, and if you can quickly say what can be done. Baltazar Bridge. I mean, from time immemorial, water over the bridge and dangers to life and property.
Right. So, well, thanks again. And I think Mr. Smith would have given us a very good segue into some of the issues we have with flooding in various parts of the island. So typically, flooding is something you expect in the lower reaches of a river, basically, in our case, closer to the coastline. And similarly, the water that gets to St. George's and to Grenville, through Baltazar, for example, does come from the upper reaches of a catchment, most times in the hillside. So essentially, what would be ideal is if the water that falls, let's say in Granitang, takes its time, meanders through the coast, and gets to Grenville eventually. Due to poor practices upstream, that does not always be the case. In the sense of things like, and I guess Mr. Thompson will speak to that in terms of land use. When you cut down the trees, it basically leaves the soil barren. When persons pave their yards and have impervious surfaces, even the roads that we construct, that too contributes to the volume of water that gets into the river channels and the speed at which it gets there, in the sense that the water gets into the river faster than it could get out. Right. And then when you have an issue in terms of the height of the sea based on the tide, that creates an issue in places like St. George's and Grenville as well. So the Baltazar Bridge in its current construct is what you would refer to as an Irish crossing. So it's an Irish crossing is a particular type of bridge that, to be fair, its intention is to be flooded. It is not meant for the water to actually pass through it, but it's kind of expected for it to be overtop, but survive the flood event, not be washed away. Right. And then after, it would return to regular usage. Okay. Currently, under a World Bank funded project known as the Grenada Resilience Improvement Project, we are currently we have engaged a consultant who are doing a new design for the Balthazar Bridge. So that new design would see the construction of a much higher bridge or more elevated bridge with a larger area through which the water and the debris that would come down.
Bamboo and right. That's what we see.
Yeah.
Right.
So essentially, what we face at some of the bridges is the same thing that NAWASA faces at the dams.
Okay.
So when you have the debris that comes down and clogs the channel through which the water must flow, it basically creates a phenomenon that you call a hydraulic jump. So the water cannot go through the material; it must now go above it and alongside it.
Right.
And if we go to
if you put a stone in a drain, because it's the same thing. Right. If you don't keep your property clear and that gets into a drain system, it's the same thing that happens. Right. Because it goes around it goes into the road, it goes into property, etc. So
right, yeah. So basically it's the same concept, just in different things. Right. A drain is smaller than a river, but it's
same principle. So is that same explanation we can say for, let's say, Wester Hall?
Right, it's a similar phenomenon.
And if we look at the Woodlands Junction, similar in vein?
Woodlands, even River Road to a smaller extent. Some of the areas in St. Patrick, even Guava and so on as well.
Okay.
So it's more of a perennial problem. Reason being, our drainage system on the island is a radial drainage system. So our land is high in the middle, low at the ends.
Right.
So the water just kind of flows out in all different directions. So you're likely to find the same problem in every
part of the island, effectively.
Basically.
Okay. You mentioned River Road. Where are we with the flood mitigation project? I know that we were building walls, and that should have solved the problems. And with the rain events of the last couple of weeks,
right. Yeah, people are asking now if the walls are tall enough, right? And
well, if it's tall enough, or whether the project is done.
Right. So the best way I could describe it at this stage is that we cannot fully evaluate the project at this stage until we actually complete all of the aspects of it.
Right.
It's kind of like the equivalent of, like you do CX in Form 5, you ask somebody to do it in Form 3, and then, things don't work out. And
right.
So until we could complete all of the other phases of the project, then we cannot say that it was not successful.
What are the outstanding phases?
So the outstanding phases are the construction of 2 new bridges. That is a new humpback bridge, or well, it wouldn't be a humpback bridge in new design, on the basis that this new bridge would be lifted and slightly upstream or further up in the river channel than the current humpback bridge.
Right.
So I could give you a little logic as to why that is necessary. Essentially, the current humpback bridge, as we know, has a hump as the shape. The problem that creates is that the edges, where it basically meets the bank of the river, causes debris and so on to be trapped there. So in a sense, it funnels the water into a much smaller area. And that now is why you see that the water gets forced out on the sides. Okay. So the new humpback bridge would essentially continue the retaining walls that we would have seen by, Postal, I hope I could. Well, that's free advertisement, I guess. Right. All the way down to closer to the stadium. This bridge would also be lifted as well, so we'd have to do some repaving on the river road to allow persons to basically drive up to this new height. Right. So this is something that we kind of envisage would allow less debris to be trapped on the edges of the bridge. And a smoother flow of water going to the channel. Right. And then also the presence of these additional walls would now prevent the water from busting its banks and, and entering the river. The other thing that I think is near and dear to all of us is Tantine. We saw in the news the flooding of TAMCC over and over again. It's not new, but the damage seems to have been greater this time with the loss of, computer equipment, etc. How can we address this? So that is actually something that the ministry has a keen eye on, the situation in Tantine, especially along that entire southern corridor of the road. As you know, we have issues that pop up every now and again in Melville Street. Well, technically River Road, Melville Street, through the tunnel, along the carnage, all the way down to the airport, so to speak. Even in all of the heavy rain, we actually had quite a bit of flooding on Kirani James Boulevard or Lagoon Road. So in the area in Tantine in particular, something that is important to note is that area was traditionally well, that was reclaimed.
Yes.
So in a sense, the water table in that area is already high. In the sense that we were doing a project to do some lighting in Tantine, and basically the guys were constantly in water, right? Which more than likely would have been saline. So in that sense, the soil and the area closest to Tantine does not have a lot of room for additional water to come in. So we would have to get creative in terms of a proposed design solution to deal with the flooding.
Is there a proper outflow for the water though in the Tantine area? There's sometimes accusations that when we build, we either don't put in the appropriate gradient for the flow, or sometimes the old passages are blocked with the construction, and hence the water have to struggle to find a new path.
It could be a combination of the two, in all fairness. Sometimes development is not as regulated as it should be. It's of no fault to anyone in particular. Some things people just generally do not know. I'm sure there are probably a lot of people who learned that Tantine was reclaimed a few seconds ago when I mentioned it, right? What is also an issue in terms of drainage is the gradient of the land. Tantine is basically flat in every direction for at least a mile.
Right.
So it's just so far that the water could actually convey itself before starting to slow down and losing energy, which also causes the debris and material suspended in the water to settle out.
Right.
And persons who drive along close to TAMCC would notice that the drains there, you often have to, we have to desilt them to remove all of the, just to create additional space for the water to flow.
Okay, all right. Mr. Thompson, and it was introduced by Mr. Blache in terms of our use. So what are some of the things that we do that create or exacerbate this problem?
Well, I listened to Mr. Blache, and one of the things that is troubling is the lack of use of data that exists but is not utilized. And Mr. Blache could support me that a lot of times policymakers don't listen to technical people because they think they know. Even though you give them good advice and say, this data is showing this and this will happen if you do this, they do not take those advice. Right? So for example, when the new bridge was built in Guelph, the company that built it came to the land use department and get extensive amount of climate data, rainfall, etc., and designed a proper bill using software, etc., to analyze the flow, etc., and design. So you'll notice that problem in Guelph doesn't happen.
Right.
When the bridges were built in Calavini and Wester Hall, even though we begged them to use the data, it was not used. So we see the problems we have there. I mean, it's a disaster that keeps recurring because the bridges were not designed properly. That's a fact that we cannot deny. So there has to be a serious retooling of how we operate when it comes to investing the people's money, the state's money, into those kinds of facilities to enhance better livelihood, access, commerce, etc. Because we see the impact it has on all sectors of the society when these things don't function as they're supposed to function.
What would have been the problem? Because the data exists. Is it expediency? Would it be significantly more expensive? What would have prompted the lack of use of the data? Because in Grenada we have the saying, you measure 10 times and cut once, and we know that brings efficiency. So the data exists. What would have been the problem?
As I said, the problem is people do not, sometimes even, I would say, even the consultants and the engineering firms, etc., do not want to follow what they have been taught, what they've studied, etc. They want to do a shortcut. They want to get the same amount of money, but do less work.
Okay.
I mean, I hope I don't get in trouble for that. But that is the reality. I mean, I've been there 38 years. I see it. So I must commend that company that did that bridge in Guelph, because they spent a lot of time looking at the data and using the software, etc., and with projections, taking climate change into consideration of what could happen. And that remember that bridge was built after we had that event in April, where we had all that flooding, etc. So we've seen a reduction in the other issues, of course, the climate change. I mean, the land use change. We've seen significant changes in the way how we use land in Grenada, and the impact of that is having on soils, because farmers are not doing what they're supposed to do. No soil and water conservation practices are really implemented and enforced as is legal, is law. There's a Soil and Water Conservation Act that is not enforced at all.
Well, I want to get in some more details on this one, but it is time for a first break. So we'll pick it up here right after the first break. Viewers and listeners, we'll be right back.
This Christmas, spread the warmth of Grenada, no matter where your family and friends are around the world. Whether it's rich aromatic Grenadian spices, a delicious homemade fruitcake, or a bottle of our finest island wine, you can send the flavors and traditions of the season with Grenada Postal Corporation's Parcel Post Service. Our Parcel Post Service makes it easy to send gifts filled with island love from Grenada to any corner of the globe. Imagine the joy on their faces when they unwrap the taste of Grenada, and it gets better. Our express service means you can rest easy knowing your gifts will arrive fast and fresh. So this Christmas, don't just send any gift. Send a piece of Grenada to ensure that your parcels reach their destination for Christmas. Post on or before December 5th. Grenada Postal Corporation. Make the Grenadian Christmas travel around the world.
Win big in the ACB season of joy and rewards.
Oh, joy, joy, joy and rewards. It's the season to enter and win what's yours. Have your loan payments wiped away for a year, bringing the joy of Christmas to you. We know that you're ready for the holidays with the $500 weekly giveaway. Oh, joy, joy, joy and rewards with ACB.
Terms and conditions apply.
And so it begins, a journey like none other. Every moment has the potential to be unforgettable. Bring home a piece of the tropical green forest with every emerald. Capture the sparkling light of flawless water in a diamond. Make the sunrise and sunsets last forever. With precious colored gemstones, the essence of happiness is in our most precious memories. So, when it all comes to an end, bring home something that will last forever. Colombian Emeralds International. Bring home more than a memory.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue. Available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
back, viewers and listeners. Sustainable water management is our theme. Mr. Thompson, just before we left off, you were speaking of the regulations for soil and water conservation. If you can just develop on that in terms of what should farmers be doing, what should us as citizens be doing to comply with the regulations.
Yeah. Well, it covers a pretty broad number of areas, from cultivating on slopes, leaving your land fallow for a period of time, ensuring that there is a cover crop at all times. It talks about the riparian zones, buffers along the river banks that should not be cleared at all, period. And of course the dumping of agricultural waste, etc., into the river that then becomes trapped under the bridges, etc.
So essentially what we heard, because what Mr. Blache spoke of was treating the symptom. Bamboo, old fridge, well, that symptom wasn't treated really, because that was something separate that we have to address. Yeah. But those things coming down the river, building bridges that could allow for it to pass, and the lands around not being flooded. But what you're speaking now of is actually the problem that caused the flow that Mr. Blache had to address in the buffers, etc. So just share, what are we seeing and where that is causing the problem?
Well, remember, the River Road problem it hasn't started in River Road.
Correct.
So, for example, that watershed, which we call the St. John's watershed, the river that flows there is the St. John's River. That starts way up in Vendome, right? And it also encompasses Tempe, Montparnasse, Reedy, etc. So what we've seen is there's been a lot of deforestation. So, for example, Grape Estate up in Reedy, right? Remember that whole area was a cocoa estate that was left abandoned by the landowner for a period of time, and then he applied to subdivide it into lots. I remember when he applied for permission to subdivide those lands, there were parcels of land that should never have gone into housing, and we made that recommendation in writing. And he went ahead and still sell those lots. And some of the people are having problems because there is massive erosion and slippage of those lands, because the soil map tells you that soil type is not suitable for that kind of land use. But they went ahead and sold those lands, and we've seen a lot of the silt that is coming down is coming out from those areas, right? Similarly in Vendome, etc., the deforestation, the cultivation along stream banks, the people dumping of their waste from their yards, etc. And of course, Mr. Blache alluded to it, the paving of yards, etc. So for example, when you look at a aerial photo, a map of that watershed, there has been maybe about a 60% growth in houses, in the number of houses between 1990 and now. Okay. All right. Plus some of the big fast structures. We have the flour mill, we have the deco, we have all these hard paved areas. When you do a calculation of the number of roofs, the surface area, and the amount of water they collect when rain falls, and that now it has to run into the drains, and within 30 minutes, 20 minutes, it's in the river. 10 minutes, it's in the river. You understand what is happening? So there's an exponential growth of increase, in the quantity, the volume of water that is ending up in the rivers. And there is absolutely no way we could build any structure to manage that, because we have to address what happens up there first.
We talk about addressing it, and you speak of regulations. We have a number of people saying we should have a land use policy. Is there a land
There is
use
a land use policy.
And where is it?
Draft legislation.
And draft legislation.
So it was approved in 2020. And it is being reviewed now again to make some additional changes, I assume, and before it goes to Parliament.
So you're saying that the policy was recommendations, but there was no teeth to the policy that we had before.
No. So there is legislation that was drafted to support that policy.
Okay.
No.
So the violators today, there are no consequences. So you say there's a watershed here, there should be no construction on this side. Somebody sell it, they build a house, there's nothing that can be done today.
Yeah. The policy speaks to those issues where it says that if you go into do any construction in an area that is susceptible, let's say, to flooding, to land slippage, if you want to do any changes to the land use type that is there, you must get permission from the entire community. Because what you do impacts every one of us.
Okay.
And therefore, you may be permitted to do that construction, but are you going to be able to bear the costs?
Right.
Because it will cost you substantial amount of money to prevent and to address, to put in mitigation actions. And it also speaks to the whole issue of supporting what physical planning is doing, supporting what works is doing, NAWASA, etc. So it was an all-encompassing piece of policy. It talks about addressing the challenges of housing itself, how we build, where we build, etc. Which areas is suitable for based on soils and slopes, etc. for certain kind of and to help NAWASA supply those areas, because there are some areas that NAWASA cannot supply because the elevation is too high. You know, so it addresses all those things. So it looks at the social aspect of it. It looks at the economic side of it, but it also looked at what reducing negative impacts for the future, because bearing in mind the changes we've seen with rainfall and all the other impacts of climate change.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Thompson spoke of all the roofs in the Tempe up through Mount Ready area, and I want to bring us to rainwater harvesting, because these are ways of now mitigating some of the challenges that we have. Is this something that we would see happening? And I know the CTO may want to address that as well, but how important is that to complement the distribution system of NAWASA?
In a word, extremely important. Rainwater harvesting is widely recognized all over the world as an important climate change adaptation measure for small island developing states. Rainwater harvesting is also practiced in developed countries and many developing countries. Rainwater harvesting is widely practiced in Australia. Rainwater harvesting is practiced in Singapore, one of the wealthiest nation states, island states in the world. So we have been, in the water sector, NAWASA, we have been promoting rainwater harvesting, certainly in the recent past and currently and hopefully going forward, within the G-Cruise project, the large Grenada climate resilient water sector. We started at the end of 2019, so it's not just this year or last year, for the last few years, and hopefully going forward. There are some components of the project, several components that promote rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting, if we can achieve, let us say, particularly in the south, if we can achieve for households, let us say, augmentation of your daily water demand by, say, 10 or 12 or 15%. So you're supplementing what you traditionally use in the municipal water supply from NAWASA, 10 to 12 to 15% from rainwater harvesting. Now, which also calls for residential water storage, and that's another area we can speak further to that. It doesn't mean that NAWASA is going to lose 10 or 12 or 15% of revenue in that area. That would be the case if we have a perfect system and everybody was properly served. right? But particularly, as I say, in the south, at the extremities of the distribution system. So many areas in the South St. George are fed from the Annandale water treatment plant in North St. George Parish. Yeah? If these people, everybody were to augment their daily water demand by, let us say, 10%, what it means is that if I am living at the bottom of a hill towards the extremity, and Trevor is living halfway up the hill, and CTO is living at the top of the hill, if I am conserving 10%, it means that there's a little more water to reach, to pressurize the system. And remember, we operate almost exclusively gravity water distribution system. So we depend on gravity for the water to flow from the water treatment plant to the distribution reservoir to the residential areas. It means there will be added water supply. So my meter is now registering 10% less, but Trevor's water meter now, he will get 6 or 7 or 8% more water. His meter would turn, and CTO would get the remaining. If you understand what I'm saying. So it doesn't mean now. I mean, as the water system is developed, and when we complete the J-Cruise project and other projects that will be coming on stream, we expect that we'll be improving the overall distribution network, and all customers would have a better quantity, quality, and reliability or consistency of supply. So that is not an absolute measure, right? But for the foreseeable future, rainwater harvesting, as I said, is a widely recognized climate change adaptation measure. Now, you may say in the dry season, where rain and falling, so how you could collect rainwater. That is true. But we're seeing with climate change that you have dry periods in the rainy season, and you have periodic rainfall in the dry season.
But it also means that the dams will have just that little bit more water as well, in terms of our efficiencies to distribute in hard times.
And another point very quickly, that is we don't often make it in NAWASA because we are promoting rainwater harvesting to augment drinking water or potable water supply. But rainwater harvesting is also a flood mitigation measure, and that is we perhaps don't make that point. Perhaps the ministry needs to be making that point more. Rainwater harvesting is a flood mitigation measure, because if everybody in Grenada has a, let us say, for simplicity, a 1,000-gallon tank, and a sharp, short showers. Remember some of these heavy rainfall events. Sometimes they get rain for 15, 20 minutes. It will fill up your 1,000-gallon tank. It will then start to overflow, and that would add to the stormwater runoff. But you don't have now stored 1,000 gallons.
And it's 1,000 less being run off
precisely
to cause the flooding.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Okay, and go ahead.
That, a lot of the slides that we have actually seen is from persons' downspouts that actually causes a washout of the soil.
Okay.
So there are some areas when...
And not necessarily on your house. It might be on your neighbor's house, who is a little lower than you.
So the water might flow from my house,
Right.
but the slide is not necessarily by me.
No, not necessarily, no.
Okay. What has to change in order for us to see more of this rainwater harvesting among the Grenadian population?
It's difficult to say, you know.
Stigma, you have to kill stigma,
Right.
because we saw it as the poor man's. That was the poor man's means.
Right.
You have a little drum in the backyard that you collect water, but
Rain barrel.
rain barrel. But we have to get that out of our mind. In fact, if you do a simple
We
experiment,
could do cisterns, and we could have a big tank in the bottom of the house, so it doesn't have to be that.
Well, I mean, in the Dutch Antilles, rainwater harvesting is mandatory. It's in fact, the king controls that whole. It's under the king's jurisdiction. Rainwater harvesting. Cayman Islands, all those places. That's a natural part.
The Bahamas.
Likewise.
That's a normal.
I think
It's a natural.
So the flat territories, especially to the north of the Caribbean, who would have limited rainwater, certainly not relief rainfall that we would get because of our mountainous terrain, they have been into rainwater harvesting. And again, I will ask the question, what needs to change for us? I mean, we know the folks in Caracou, they have been doing it for for eons. How do we bring this sustainable practice to Grenada?
Definitely some kind of incentive would be necessary.
There is some action being done. In fact, there is draft regulations.
Legislation
On that to make it mandatory that every household should have some rainwater harvesting system.
And we're going to have a conversation where new construction about a certain size must have X or...
Well, that's already law.
Precisely.
It's not enforced, but it's already in the building codes from what was revised in 2015 and 2016, around 2015.
It is also a component of the G-Cruise project that has been supporting the promotion of this legislation and these regulations. It's a matter for the policy makers. The intention is that the Physical Planning and Development Control Act 2016 would be amended to it's not enforced, it's not in law. The building code and the Physical Planning and Development Control Act 2016 would have to be further amended to make
so we have these bits of
harvesting
regulations but not harmonized is what we're saying.
Precisely.
So it's present to one place, but there can't be enforcement from the PPU.
So for example, any of those facilities or buildings of a certain size, hotels, etc., must have rainwater harvesting as a standard operating procedure. Practice.
And then technically, it includes government buildings.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, the government builds the largest buildings.
Right.
Technically, we build schools.
Yeah.
Which has a very high daytime population who would need it.
And a high water consumption.
Right. And I know NAWASA has been forced to distribute water to schools, certainly in drought and so, because of their challenges.
Yes.
When the stadium was being built, we recommended rainwater harvesting be incorporated. It was not. Do you know how much millions of gallons they could have been stored in that underground there to be utilized for maintaining the fields, the washrooms, the whole facility? I mean, instead of using NAWASA's treated water, as I said, sometimes the small man making a recommendation is not accepted. But we have to change that culture and say, listen, this makes sense. This is a good investment. It rebounds in savings, etc., and of course preserving the environment and all of that. So let's go in that direction.
What is the Ministry's infrastructure's role in ensuring, one, driving legislation, first of all, towards best practices, and then the enforcement thereof?
The Planning and Development Authority, they are statutorized now. So that is not necessarily in the direct remit of the Ministry of Infrastructure. But it's essentially, because we are basically the designers of all the government's infrastructure, we kind of have to be the champion of that cause, to make sure that we stick to the codes and implement all of the things, to kind of lead by example, for the nation. What
has been the challenge with government following those rules and leading by example? I mean, I know quite often we don't necessarily go into the consolidated fund. It's grant funding, some loans, etc. So what's the issue with government following these regulations, leading by example, and then having the moral authority to enforce on others?
So I could only probably speak out since I have been, Chief Technical Officer. But on my end, we try to stick to, international best practice when it comes to design and so on. What is also a regulation, or should I say a stipulation enforced on our part, especially when we have donor-funded projects, is to make sure that we check the boxes in terms of climate change and modeling and designing for all of the necessary scenarios. Right. It's something that we've had to do, for example, for the proposed plans for, let's say, the Sate's Breakwater project that we have to get going on very soon, just to be able to make sure that our designs are not only contemporary but should I say future-proof.
Right. Okay. It is time for us to take our second break. So let's take the second break. When we return, we'll be able to have your contributions, but we'll go a little bit more into the sustainable water management initiatives and what you can and should be doing to ensure that we have that down lock for Grenada.
Spend $50 or more at any Hubbard's department or participating outlets for a chance to win free fuel, free drinks, free prizes, free property and vehicular insurance, free Hub TV and internet, free electricity, free coke, free water, free cooking gas, free paint supplies, free Dutch Lady milk, free passes to Sunshine promotion events for 2024, free groceries, all for one whole year. And every winner receives a free lunch package. But that's not all. Drive away in style in a brand new Isuzu D-Max. It sips, it doesn't guzzle. So fill out your entries and place them into the marked entry boxes. This promotion is brought to you in part by Dutch Lady, Danny, Promo, Supreme Bleach, Creative Chef, Grenlac, Floor, Salt Petroleum, Grenadian General Insurance Company Limited, Coca-Cola, Sunshine Promotion, Caribouries, Guap Bag, Sesame Spain, and Food Fear. Promotion runs from April 2nd to December 24. Terms and conditions apply.
If you're working for a while, come by Cots, I'll make you smile. Cots Black Friday come around. We are the best prices in town. Black Friday starts now at Cots. Yeah, it's back. Cots Black Friday. I tell you, hurry fast. Traffic on the highway. You know we got unbeatable prices. And furniture, electronics, and appliances. Are you coming? Say yeah. Weekly prices. And best deals of this season. Shop and credit to win big. And pay nothing until next year, February. Rock out and come down to Coats. Cots already load. Cots already load. Black Friday start. Cots already load. And go when Black Friday come out.
For the past 8 months, we've poured our hearts into this journey.
We honed our talents,
embraced our culture, and dedicated ourselves to something greater.
Now it's time to share it with you.
On November 30th,
step into a world of elegance, beauty, and purpose at the Grenada Trade Center.
Join us as we inspire, captivate, and represent the beauty and strength of Grenadian women.
This is more than a pageant. It's a night of unforgettable talent and elegance.
Expect show-stopping performances from Grenada's top artists alongside the grace and passion of each contestant.
Don't miss the Miss Grenada Pageant 2024.
The beauty meets purpose.
Mark your calendars for November 30th at the Grenada Trade Center.
Miss Grenada Pageant, shaping a brighter future for Grenada.
One empowered woman at a time.
It's almost that magical time of year, and everyone's pitching in to make it unforgettable. This holiday season, even the little ones are rolling up their sleeves. With every brushstroke, every splash of color, we're crafting memories that will shine for a lifetime. Make this Christmas even more festive with Berger. Enjoy up to 40% off selected items and enter for a chance to win big, up to $1,000. To enter, purchase any Berger product nationwide. Terms and conditions apply. Christmas just looks better with Berger.
Grenada, get ready. A new season of the Grenleg Debates is coming. Informative, impromptu, bright young minds sparking powerful ideas. The Grenleg Debates. The Grenleg Debates will be broadcasted on MTV Mondays and Thursdays at 9 p.m., Saturdays at 6 p.m., and on GBN TV Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m., Sundays at 4 p.m. Broadcast begins Saturday, October 7th. Tune in.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners, Beyond the Headlines, and we're discussing sustainable water management. You certainly can feel free to weigh in 440-1252. That's the number you can certainly call. Mr. Smith, what can NAWASA do to assist in watershed management?
currently the authority, so it's early days, I can't go into any details. The board of directors, has to review the initial concept that was recently prepared. But what I can say is, perhaps quite fortuitously, about 6 weeks ago, we met with a delegation from the CARICOM Development Fund, the CDF, and we have from them a concept for a watershed improvement, a watershed management, improved watershed management project. We're looking at a $10 million US dollar project. And what would be the goal of a watershed management project would be, let us say, increasing the health, we can use that term, the health and resiliency of the key at-risk watersheds that NAWASA uses for water production.
What is a watershed? Let me just make sure. And where are some of those key? Well, I think we have our first caller. So good evening, caller. Welcome. Good evening, caller. Go ahead. Seems you have lost that caller.
He or she is not there.
Yeah.
So Grenada is divided into 71 watershed. A watershed is a discrete geographical land area. Every point within which water in that watershed flows to a system of rivulets, small rivers, larger rivers, streams, and so on, and all eventually drain to the sea.
Okay.
You should also include that it is demarcated by highland, right?
Yeah.
So watershed, the extent is like a ridge.
A ridge. It's delineated by ridges, highland areas or ridges. So it's a discrete geographical area. That's what we mean by the watershed.
So
we use the term catchment, which is a subset of a watershed.
Yeah. Okay, we have another caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome. Yes, go ahead. And please listen us through the telephone, not the television or radio where you're looking at viewing at the program, but listen and speak through the telephone. All right, we'd have to. That caller would have to call back.
Yeah, so I'll quickly go ahead to finish my response. So increasing watershed health and resilience would be the kind of ultimate.
And define that. How do you increase the health and resilience of the ridge?
Right. So, well, not of the ridge, of the watershed. Remember, the watershed is delineated by ridges, so it's everything within that outline of the watershed, which are ridges. So, the project that we are looking at is just in concept stage.
Well, let me just see if we have the caller now. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Hey, good evening. Greetings. Thank you. It seemed that there was some problem before. Anyway, I've been yearning I want to make an observation and a suggestion. It's not a question. There are no questions here. I've been listening very attentively, and all that's coming out there, heavy stuff for the Grenadian people to hear about. The River Road, I'd like to put emphasis on the River Road project. As a person who have worked in hydraulic systems and heavy equipment, pressurized from 100 psi to 2500, much different to what it is with a flowing river. But as for the River Road project, I'd like to share this with you. I remember when I was a boy, my grandfather told me that where Porcel is right there now and so on, that area road from the corner down to the Humbert Bridge was where the river flowed. Therefore, I'd like to suggest, and to cut it short, the principle used in the face basin in your washroom is a principle I suggest that should be used to take as an overflow, as a relief process, to take that water when it builds on the corner after Mr. Sport shop there, straight through under the road. It means that we had to go into a lot of money to get this thing done, but we'd certainly pay in resolving the problem with the overflow when it's at the engineer clearly said when it reaches to the stage of hydraulic hydraulic jumping. I'd like the engineers to seriously consider this idea into the future development for the resolution of that flooding in River Road. Remembering always, and it can be investigated, that the river flowed in front Porcel's shop. I trust that my idea is given some consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller. Certainly appreciate. You got a recommendation?
Yeah, I think I understand what he's trying to say. But it's actually something that you expect. The river changes its course ever so often because essentially the floodplain, which is a phenomena that basically from where River Road is on one side of the floodplain.
Right.
And then if you could imagine where the road close to Grand Lake, that's the other side of the floodplain.
We have another caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good night. Hello, good night.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
We're hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes, good night to all the gentlemen there, and I must say that I'm feeling happy. I think the three gentlemen they are making a lot of very good, valuable contribution. Hats off to three of you all. First of all, to Mr. Thompson, I think you have been a wonderful source, well sourced to the Ministry of Agriculture. A lot of what you said there is quite true that, with the standard and land that should be used for certain things that are not even the privilege to use for certain things and have not been put into law. And so I think those things are long overdue. Overdue. In terms of NAWASA, Mr. Smith, people, where you have your dams, most of where you have the NAWASA dams is within heavy terracing people's property and whatnot, and as soon as some rainfall, you cannot get to those things. Over the years, NAWASA should have some control. Government should put some control and assist in some of the getting to the dam heads in some of these situations, because as soon as you have heavy rain, you can't get into where you dam your water, and that has been causing you to have delays in your bringing back water, good pipeline water to people. But now what I've done a lot. I could testify for that. For where I used to get water and where I'm getting water now. A lot of work have been done, but there's some carelessness there. For instance, in the Douglaston area, you all are not using no water from that day. The whole complete thing is mashed up. For that matter, a whole bridge have been mashed up through NAWASA. Take out the water from debris from the dam and put it on the side, and it mash up a whole bridge. I could testify to that, right? And better management needed. But NAWASA definitely have come a long way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you. So a couple of points there made by the caller. One of it, Mr. Smith, is access to your dams and the challenges faced there. Is that something that we can resolve? It almost seems like a chicken and egg, because you'd want the dams away from everything. But if it's away from everything, there will be a problem getting to it.
Yeah. So that problem, along with a multitude of other problems, would be addressed in the watershed management project that I referred to, that I'm in the process of responding on. So what are some of the components of such a project? The first one I could refer to would be technical and scientific research into critical watersheds. We're
busy tonight. We have another caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome. Go ahead, caller. We're waiting your call.
Good night, and how are you tonight?
Very well. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm calling, and my question is directed to Mr. Smith. Since I'm a little boy and I'm not a young man, I've been hearing about the rose head, and the rose head been blocked whenever we get rain. He alluded to something of that sort tonight, about what come down on the sedimentation and things like that. is there any way that before you get to that rose head, upstream, that the catchment area can be meshed with different sizes of mesh to catch that sediment that comes down, so that sediment does not reach the rose head? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
There is indeed. And about 9 or 10 of our intake systems, dams, intakes, under the ongoing G-Cruise project. So these will be done in probably from second quarter 2025. They have to be finished with the G-Cruise project by the end of 2025. They use the term check dams. Yeah, so you construct a smaller, it's more like a weir, right? An engineering structure, a low, hard engineering structure, invariably out of reinforced concrete, a few meters upstream of the existing dam and intake. I think that's what the caller is referred to.
So it's almost like a filter or blockage. So what gets to the dam is actually water and not some of the debris.
It's like a sacrificial structure.
Right.
They will be blocked. They will be filled up with the trees and soil and silt and so on. And therefore, and then the water would flow over, but you would get less sediment into the substantive dam.
And you're saying that's part of the G-Cruise project? And
for about 9 or 10 dams, yeah. So check dams is one of the project elements under the G-Cruise project.
And that we anticipate happening in the latter part of 2025?
Well, from probably second quarter 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, from early towards the end of 2025.
So from circa March, April going down.
Right. So I made reference to technical and scientific research, and principally the main outputs there would be what we call watershed management plans. We have to have discrete watershed management plans for all of the critical watersheds. Another component would be strengthening the resiliency of our critical infrastructure at the dams and intakes. So I'm talking about the dam itself.
What plans? So let's stick to watershed management. What does that entail? What do we need to do as NAWASA, as a population, to protect our watersheds?
Well, precisely, that's one of the components. Strengthening the resiliency of our dams and intakes. So the check dam would be one of such sub-projects, one of the interventions you would do.
Okay, we have another caller in line. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Gentlemen. Mr. Smith. Sorry, let me turn down my radio. Yes, good night, gentlemen. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, we're hearing you.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, what I'm growing up in the 70s, what I noticed is we used to have a big tank up in Janangle on a hill there, I don't know, storing water. That used to for in the dry time. I don't know if that is condemned. And also the one in Woban. In the Gary time they had that, they have some borehole system in Shaman Valley. So that used to pump the water from the borehole system in this big tank up in Woban. But it seems as all these things condemned. But where that tank was in Woban then now, you all should have include a bigger one there. So that could help solve the south, part of the south. And same the one in Janangle. That could have continued, but so when in the rainy time that is filling up when you treat your water. I don't know how long the treated water could stay in a tank before you do anything to it again. And also it should have been extended to a hill over Montrouge. But now I think it's too late because the land is so occupied here to get a big tank, a tank like that you all have up in Grand Roy. I see they have a tank way up in Grand Roy. We need a size of tank that in some way down over Montrouge. If you know, there's a hill called Guankai, but what I know is the real name is Grand High. Grand High, but I guess maybe because of French they say in Grand Kai, but the hill is Grand High. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I don't know, this caller must know about the G-Cruise project, because caller, I can't conclusively respond to you. I am aware of the disused tank in was it John Anglais? Yeah. I believe from my earlier stint in NAWASA between 83 and 95, that was always a bit of a mystery for me. I believe it may be some kind of embarrassing thing. It was difficult, the hydraulics, it was difficult to get water to flow to it, to get it filled. Okay. Right, so I can't really speak much about it. It was there even long prior to it probably was built in the 1960s or so, right? So, yeah, that is I can't really speak definitively to that. What I can say though is that under the G-Cruise project, there are plans in the coming in the next few months to install, to build, to construct a large distribution reservoir, we call it storage reservoir, distribution reservoir, on Guankai Hill. As a matter of fact, at the request of the MIT ministry, which was improving the road to Guankai, they came and asked us to put in I believe a 6-inch pipeline, the distribution pipeline from that tank. Is already, I'm not sure if it is completed, but it is, if not completed, substantially done. So we've moved on that over the last couple of weeks and months. So in response to your question, sir, you are very correct. There is going to be a tank on Guankai, and they're going to be, I think in all, it's 9 or 10 tanks that are being large. You're talking between 350 to 450 500,000 gallon distribution reservoirs. There is one, we're in GBN, where there's one right next door, within about 30 meters of where we're sitting right now, right, in what we call the Observatory Waterworks, that distributes water to the town of St. George. I'm not sure that you are quite right, your information with respect to Woburn, because NAWASA has a total of 1 million gallons of storage in Woburn, and that is the main source of distribution to the south, the various communities in the south, including Lansapine and so forth. So Woburn tank, there's a concrete tank, and there's a steel tank. Together they are 1 million gallons. So yes, the concept of having treated water distribution reservoirs at strategic points in your distribution system is a sound one. It is a hurricane response measure. It is a climate change adaptation measure. But just a word of caution. It is extremely costly to build one of these tanks, costs several million US dollars. So it is extremely, it would be very difficult for NAWASA to have, let us say, a week's supply of treated water at strategic locations all over our distribution networks, all over Grenada and Carriacou and Petit Martinique for that by example.
All right, let's just look at some policy initiatives probably. So if I mention leak detection devices as standard within homes, is this something that we should well, buildings, not I should just say homes, is it something that we should be moving towards?
Devices.
Yeah. Well, leak detection devices are more used by the by the water authorities. Now, we have leak detector, they refer to as leak noise correlators. They're fairly sophisticated equipment that sends out sound waves and so forth. So it's usually the municipal water authority that would have these. And then what we can promote is the use of low flow devices like faucet aerators and shower head aerators and low flush, low volume toilets. The traditional toilets, if like me, you grew up in the 60s and 70s and so forth, a toilet would be, when you flush a toilet, that water flushing for about 45 seconds. They would use 5 and 5.5 gallons. There are water-saving toilets now that use up to as low as 1.6, 2 gallons, or as low as 1.5 or 1.6 gallons per flush. The modern ones now, they have 2 little buttons on the top, and you press one for one type of use, and you press another one for the other type of use. Those are the modern types. The G-Cruise project, again, we had an intervention with the local hardware suppliers and distributors, and so promoting the use of these water-saving devices and low-flow toilets. So we can promote water conservation techniques. We can encourage households to do a water audit periodically. If you turn off your meter, turn off your if you turn off all of your water devices, right? So you turn off the little stopcock by your toilets, your sink, and you ought to be using no water, right? And you can check your water meter, when you go to bed at night, and check it the following morning. If your meter has registered any water, it means that you have a leak somewhere within underground, or some underground pipe, or some pipe in the wall, or whatever it is. And then you can call NAWASA. We charge a modest fee to use this leak noise correlator or leak detection equipment to assist customers
how modest
to find a leak.
How modest is modest?
I do $172.50.
Okay.
I wouldn't remember, but that is fairly modest, because you could be doing damage to your structure, to your foundation, and you could be wasting water. That $172 could leak in a month, or in 3 weeks for that matter. So these are some of the measures that are being encouraged under the G-Cruise project, and that we in NAWASA would have to continue promoting at the household level.
Speak to non-revenue water now. What are you doing to reduce non-revenue water?
Yeah, non-revenue water is water that the authority spends a lot of money to dam, harvest, convey to the treatment plant, treat at significant cost, disinfect, distribute to distribution reservoirs, distribute right to the customer's house, to their meter, and for which we bill them every month and we collect revenue. So we did a fairly accurate exercise around April or May of this year, and we computed our non-revenue water at about 26%. The actual volume of water per day was close to 2 million gallons per day.
That's
so remember
2 million gallons that you're treating.
Of the 8 million gallons per day that we treat.
But not getting to customers.
Precisely.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are you doing to reduce that?
Right.
Because that is 26% of your production being wasted.
Much million.
Essentially.
Right.
So you do that by instituting improved non-revenue water management, or to continuously work towards reducing your non-revenue water. And in fact, interesting that you asked that question, because in a few days' time, on the 2nd of December, management made a recommendation a couple of months to the board of directors, was approved, and on the 2nd of December, we'll be setting up a non-revenue water management unit for the first time ever in NAWASA. It's going to be headed by an engineer, a couple of supervisors.
What is the purpose of the unit?
To focus full-time on non-revenue water management. It's a fairly complex topic, but to simplify it, they would be focused. It's going to be about 8 or 9 people in all, and they are going to be focusing full-time.
How would we benefit, how would NAWASA benefit from this unit?
Because if on our target, and we just finished an exercise predicting our targets over the next 5 years, and the goal is to reduce that 26% to I believe, is 18.5 or 19%.
Is it replacing pipes? I mean, are we losing?
It's a myriad of activities. Replacing pipelines, we set up what we call DMAs, district metered areas. And we will have a bulk meter, invariably 4-inch or 6-inch meter that registers the flow of water into that, again, a discrete distribution area, a district metered area. And we do our calculations, we compare the flow into that bulk meter with all of the meter sales from all of the customers within that area. And if there is a great, so we have a district metered area in Fort Judy. And the non-revenue water, the recent exercise that was done, I believe the non-revenue water right now in Fort Judy is about 40-something%.
Right.
There's a serious problem.
What are the causes? And then what's the resolution?
So invariably, it will be leaks in the mains. So I was making the point that 26% non-revenue water.
So it's NAWASA's infrastructure mainly.
Precisely, that is usually the case.
Right.
But to finish that point though, the 26% non-revenue water is comprised of approximately 2 million gallons per day that goes to waste. Right, where you compare the 2 with the almost 8, you can see the 1 quarter, 25, 26%, of which of that 2 million, 1.6 million was computed as what we call real losses. And real losses are primarily losses in your distribution and transmission. It is our own leaking, aged water distribution network.
We have a final caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome. Good evening, caller. Welcome. It seems as though that caller wasn't able to get in touch with us. Desalination plants. Is this mandatory now for constructions of major projects, especially if they're close to the sea? Or is it still up to the builders?
There is no legislation. I see my colleagues are hesitating. I don't have a problem answering that question. There is no legislation or regulation requiring it. What I know is that NAWASA over the years, when like an environmental impact assessment is being done at the early stages before a project, let's say a large hotel project is built, NAWASA would advise the EIA practitioner, who would include it in his or her report, that hopefully the developer would follow the recommendations. That do not try to depend anywhere close to 100% of your daily water demand on the municipal water supply. So in other words, practice rainwater harvesting. You could use it for irrigation. If necessary, you could use it for laundry. You could use it for toilet flushing. Yeah, there's one hotel in Grenada that practices that now, right? And also for the larger hotels to put in your own desalination plant. Right?
I want to make a point on that. We have drafted the National Water Policy and legislation that speaks to the establishment of a water resources management unit. That all of these things would fall under its ambit. It will have the power to look at what are the demands, what are the needs, and how you separate it between agriculture, industry, NAWASA itself, etc. My personal view is that no entity should be abstracting, taking water, whether it's desal or thing, without there being a cost. It's not free. Water is not free. It has an economic value, and based on the Dublin principle from the Rio Convention. And therefore, somebody has to have a view over what you are doing. Because desal it has its benefit, but it also has its negative side to it. What you put back into the sea, the brine, it could be devastating to the environment. So there must be some overarching regulation and oversight body to manage that, because otherwise we could be as a small island state, coastal state, we could be taking here, but we damaging the reefs, etc.
Right.
And later on causing problems. And I just want to add to that. Somebody called me yesterday and said that they see the guys who cleaning, removing all the debris from the slides, etc., dumping it in Mungie, in the river, back in the river.
I had a report of that.
Yeah, it befuddles you.
Right.
You know how we could be so narrow in our thinking. Yeah.
Right. We're almost at time, so I need you gentlemen to probably give us a wish list, as it were. CTO, I would deliberately start with you. Whether we're talking about the population in terms of citizens, corporate entities, or the policymakers, what are some of the things that you'd like to see us do quickly in order for us to move towards a sustainable system of water management?
Right. Well, to be fair, and it's good that you highlighted all of the stakeholders, as you mentioned, because it is really a collaborative approach. It's not something that the government could do on their own, because it's just so much we could do with our resources. Right. In a similar fashion, it's just so much the landowners, even NAWASA, so it's really a collaborative approach, and I think we kind of all have to put our shoulders to the wheel to make sure that it happens, because as we see, people, we lose productivity because all of the schools were closed, our workplace was kind of shut down. We spend so much time and money cleaning up, so it really.
Well, we lost property and we lost lives.
Lives, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's really something you can't even put a cost on, that we really have to. Know.
What would be your one wish if you have to give advice to the population listening, the viewers and listeners? What would be the one advice that you give as something they can do,
right,
to improve our situation?
They have to be vigilant. That is the best way I could describe it. Whatever you're doing, you have to be mindful that what you do has a cost, whether you see it or not. So vigilance is something that we need. In terms of protecting your, whether it be how you discharge your rainwater also as well.
Thompson?
Yeah, well, I think all of us have to understand that everything we do, whether it's around our homes or in our lives, it ends up eventually in the stream, in the river, and it is going to have a negative impact. If what you're doing is negative, it's going to have a negative impact, whether it's along the river coast or in the sea. Right. So we have to, become our brother's keeper. That's the best way I could put it. True, we lost that was maybe the first life in recent memory from flooding, and sadly she was buried today. But it could have been much worse. And we have to pay attention to what we are doing, because we see the impact, and we can reverse it, to some measure, to reduce the negative impacts on all of our lives.
So even if we mean planting a tree.
Yeah.
All right, as we look towards the resuscitation, as it were, of the catchment areas.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you have the final word.
Give me two.
You can give two.
So you just kind of stole the winner from my sails.
My apologies.
What I was going to say, the two things I would dearly love to see going forward in Grenada, the water sector, NAWASA promoting and so on, government enabling, and our society embracing. The most significant one, and in fact it's one of the elements of the watershed management project that I referred to, that we are hoping to embark on shortly, is reforestation of our forests. I asked the question repeatedly, is how many trees have we replanted in Grenada since Hurricane Ivan? I'm yet to get a clear answer from anyone. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, as I said, under this watershed management project, there are various slope stabilization, check dams, strengthening of our infrastructure, of the water infrastructure, but ultimately leading to reforestation with the proper trees that don't, drink too much water, that help to hold the soil, help to aerate the soil, make the soil a very good sponge so that more water can infiltrate and flow out. It's called base flow during the drier period. So make our watersheds healthier. And finally, my second one, if you'd allow me, Trevor alluded to it a while ago, the Water Resources Management Unit is one of the critical components of the ongoing G-Cruise project. We have had draft legislation and regulations for the creation of the Water Resources Management Unit. Another smaller bit of legislation to amend the NAWASA Act to take away responsibility for water resources management. Because right now, NAWASA is responsible both for water resources management and they are selling water, so they're a water service provider. And the modern approach to water management is to separate those functions. So hence the creation of a semi-autonomous entity called the Water Resources Management Unit. It is to be housed under the PERC, Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. So there's a PERC Amendment Act to enable that, the NAWASA Amendment Act to take away that responsibility from NAWASA, and the substantive legislation and regulations for establishment of the Water Resources Management Unit. We understand, to the best of my knowledge, I understand this close to being brought to the Houses of Parliament. The draft legislation, we were informed, was approved by the Cabinet of the Government of Grenada in February of this year. We understand it's very, very close to being brought to the Houses of Parliament to become law, and the G-Cruise project has a substantial allocation to help fund that new unit. Well, for the first year, although if we take too long to set it up, we're going to run out of time and we lose the money.
The G-Cruise ends end of 2025.
Well, it's been extended to June of 2026, but what they call it terminal disbursement.
Right.
So most of the money has to be spent by the end of next year, by the end of 2025. We can't be spending money into March and April and May. That's not how it works. Okay. Right? So planting of trees, reforestation under this holistic watershed management project that would not be embarked upon only by NAWASA. It would have to be in collaboration, obviously, with the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry Division, right? And the policymakers taking the bold step to bring this legislation to the Houses of Parliament. Hopefully our politicians would approve it and so on, and support for the growth and development of this Water Resources Management Unit. Finally, if I may, I used the analogy a little while ago on some interview. If we think of throwing a spear, right? We're going back to Stone Age, we're throwing a spear at this water resources problem, at this water shortage problem. The tip of that spear is the Water Resources Management Unit. I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Terrence Smith, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Blache, for all of your contributions and the education shared with our viewers and listeners this evening, and for you who have been with us over the last 90 plus minutes as we discuss sustainable water management in Grenada. Thank you for joining us, and remember, we as citizens also have a responsibility towards sustainable water management. In our little bit, by what we do, we can determine whether Grenada floods or not. Thank you very much for being with us, and I look forward for being with you again in the next 6 days, 22.5 hours. Have yourselves a wonderful evening.